Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown, and today is Triumph Tuesday. We made it through Monday. I know you are excited because you got some things accomplished, you got some things done. But today we want to talk about the architecture of articulation. If they have to guess, you lost the play. And I want to look at this. Yesterday, we dealt with something real. We talked about how your communication is conditioning people's response to you. Whether you realize it or not, every time you speak, every time you show up, every time your name pops up, people are forming a reaction. That's not random, that's trained behavior. But today, we're not staying in awareness. Today, we're moving into execution. Because it's one thing to know your communication is off, it's another thing to fix it. And here's the truth most people don't realize. You can have the right message and still lose people because your delivery doesn't carry it correctly. So today, we're building something different. We're building structure, because if your message changes every time it leaves your mouth, you don't have communication, you have leakage. Let's look at scripture. Let's look at Habakkuk 2:2. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tablets, that he may run that readeth it. God didn't say give the vision, he said make it plain. Because if it's not clear, it can't be carried. And if it's not understood, it can't be executed. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Join us on this heavenly journey, one song at a time, Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Triumph Tuesday. What you send versus what lands. Let's get something clear from the start. Just because you said it doesn't mean that's what people received. That's where most people lose. They judge their communication based on what they meant instead of what actually landed. But communication is not about the intention. It's about interpretation. If I say something with clarity in my mind, but you hear confusion, then the communication failed. But because I didn't speak, but because I didn't structure it in a way you could receive it. Let me say that again. The communication failed, not because I didn't speak, but because I didn't structure it in a way you could receive it. And if you're building a brand, leading a team, raising a family, or operating at any level of influence, you don't get rewarded on what you said. You get rewarded on what people understood. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
You're riding the waves of faith and grace on Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Triumph Tuesday, and we are talking about the architecture of articulation. So let's talk about the lost signal. There's real data behind this, people. Study shows that communication loses 20 to 30% of its clarity every time it's passed from one person to another. Think about that. By the time your message goes through 2 or 3 people, it's not even your message anymore. It's a version of your message, and that's dangerous. Because now your brand is being represented by something you didn't actually say. So if your original message isn't tight, clear, and structured, it doesn't stand a chance. Weak communication doesn't survive distance. That's why structure matters. Think about that game we used to play. We'd be like, I'm going to tell you this and I want you to pass it down, and I'm going to go down there and make sure to see if it's the same message that we originally started with. And about time it get to the end, the message has changed, it's different. It's not even close to what the original message was. So that's why you have to have structure and a system of communication so that your message can't get weakened or changed, because your brands depend on your structured message. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Stay tuned and stay blessed here on Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Triumph Tuesday, and we are talking about the Architect of Articulation. Articulation, yes, you have to structure that. You have to build how you communicate. So the 3 levels of narrative. Let's look at the 3 levels of narrative. The system. Now let's build the system. Every effective communicator operates on 3 levels. And if you miss one, your message feels incomplete. Level 1 is tactical. That's the pass. Level 2 is relational. That's the assist. And level 3, visionary. That's the scoring drive. And I go by the business point guard. So, I put it into the pass, the assist, and the scoring drive. So let's go over those 3 levels again. Level 1, tactical, which is the pass. Level 2, relational, which is the assist. Level 3, visionary, the scoring drive. This is how you control flow. Now, not just in business, but in life. You don't just talk, you orchestrate. And here's where most people fall short. They live on one level or in one level. Some people only give instructions. Some people only try to connect emotionally. Some people only talk vision with no execution. But high-level communicators, they know when to shift levels. They know when to be direct, when to connect, and when to elevate the moment. Because every conversation doesn't require the same approach, but every conversation requires awareness of where you are in the flow. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Stay tuned and stay blessed here on Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Triumph Tuesday, and let's talk about the levels, the 3 levels of narratives. Let's talk about the 3 levels. Level 1 is tactical. What is tactical? That's the pass. That's the pass. This is where clarity lives. This is instructions, direction, execution language. What needs to be done? I'm glad you asked. When does it need to be done? I'm glad you asked. How should it be done? I'm glad you asked. That's simple. Again, this is instructions, directions, execution language. And what that language sound like? What needs to be done? When does it need to be done? How should it be done? It's that simple. But most people mess this up. They overtalk, they over-explain, they confuse. And now people are guessing. Let me say this clearly. If people have to interpretate your instructions, you've already lost control of the play. Clarity is leadership. Confusion is expensive. When people don't have clarity, they fill in the gaps with assumptions. Now, they're moving based on what they think you meant, not what you actually said. That's where mistakes happen. That's where times get wasted. That's where frustration builds. So when you communicate tactically, you be direct, you be structured, you be intentional, because execution depends on clarity. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Stay tuned and stay blessed here on Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. This is Triumph Tuesday, and we are talking about the levels. So the first level was what? Tactical. Yes, it's the pass. Now the second level is relational, the assist. Now let's go deeper, because even if your instructions are clear, that doesn't mean people are bought in. This is where connection comes in. Tone, presence, energy, and listening. This is where people decide, do I trust you? Do I feel you? Do I want to follow you? Because people don't commit to instructions, they commit to connections. A lot of leaders lose their team right here. They focus so much on tasks, they forget people. But people don't give full effort when they don't feel seen. They don't open up where they don't feel safe. So now your communication breaks down. Not because they don't understand, but because they're not engaged. Relational communication builds alignment. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Stay tuned and stay blessed here on Wave Radio.
You just tuned in to the Afternoon Praise here on Wave Radio, and let's talk about level 3. Level 3 is visionary. This is the scoring drive right here. Now we move into legacy communication. This is bigger than the moment. This is where your brand speaks. Where are we going? Why does this matter? What are we building? Because if your communication only lives in the present, it dies in the presence. If your words don't move people beyond moment, they will never become a movement. Vision gives context to effort. It turns work into purpose. And when people understand the bigger picture, they move differently. They show up differently. They commit at a higher level. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Bringing the sounds of heaven 24/7, Wave Radio.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. How's your Tuesday going? I know your day is almost up. Some of y'all, your day is just starting because you're listening to me from different parts of the world. So I want to thank you for tuning in to Wave Radio, listening to the Afternoon Praise, and spending time with me, Demetrius L. Brown. But let's talk about precision, eliminating noise. Let's deal with one of the biggest problems in communication: talking too much. You remember that song? You talk too much. You never shut up. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all ain't too saved to know what I'm talking about. But some people think more words equals more clarity. No. More words equals more opportunity to be misunderstood. Talking more doesn't make you clearer. It makes you easier to misinterpret. Every extra word that doesn't add value creates room for confusion. Your message starts clean, then becomes cluttered. Precision is discipline. You don't say everything you think. You say what moves the message forward at that time. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
I'm having me a good day. Yes, I am. Woo! I'm having me a good day. Oh, yes, I am. Man, what a day, what a day. I'm blessed. God woke me up this morning. God, I thank you. I thank you. I don't care what's right. I don't care what's wrong, but I know God woke me up. He gave me another opportunity to move in my purpose. Woo, I thank you, Jesus. But let's talk about the discipline of simplicity. Simple doesn't mean weak. Get that out of your head. Simple doesn't mean weak. Simple means refined. It means you removed everything that doesn't need to be there. Because clarity is not about adding, it's about removing. If you can't explain it simply, you don't fully understand it yet. Simplicity travels faster. It sticks longer. That's why God said, make it plain. Make it plain. Because people can only run with what they understand. Okay, let me repeat this whole thing one more time. I'm gonna repeat it one more time. Simple doesn't mean weak. Simple means refined. It means you removed everything that doesn't need to be there. Because clarity is not about adding, it's about removing. And if you can't explain it simple, you don't fully understand it yourself. Simplicity, simple, travels faster. It sticks longer. That's why God again said, make it plain, because people can only run with what they understand. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. Man, we love feedback. We got to have feedback. Feedback is good sometimes. Feedback can be not good sometimes, depending who's giving the feedback and what the moment is. It's all about timing. But let's fix a mistake most people make. They say something and then ask, do you understand? That's a lazy question. Most people will say yes, even if they don't. Instead, ask, what did you hear me say? Now you're checking alignment. Now you're controlling the outcome. Communication isn't complete when you speak. Let me say that again. Communication isn't complete when you speak. It's complete when it's received correctly. Feedback is confirmation. It makes sure both sides are operating from the same understanding. It's making sure you are on the same page. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You just tuned into the Afternoon Praise. If you got a shout out, you got a request, hit me up. And again, I just say thank you for allowing us to pray over your concerns, over your issues, over the things that you need prayer. So continue to go on the website, waveradio.com, and put in your prayer requests, and we will steward those correctly according to how God wants us to pray over those. But let's talk about nonverbal communication. Your words are only part of the message. Your body, your tone, your presence. That's the real communication. If your words say confidence, but your posture say hesitation, people believe your posture. Your body can cancel your message. Your presence speak before you open your mouth. And it keeps speaking after you finish. And this is where a lot of people are losing influence without even realizing it, because they're focused on finding the right words, but they haven't paid attention to the signal their body is sending. Your eyes communicate, your shoulders communicate, your pace communicate, your breathing communicates. That's why you enter a room the way you sit. The way you enter a room, the way you sit, the way you hold yourself when pressure hits, people are reading all of that. So even before your message is evaluated for content, it's being judged for congruence. Yes. Does this person sound like what they're saying? Do they carry what they are trying to communicate? Does their presence support their words or undermine them? That's why nonverbal communication matters, because your body is either reinforcing your message or fighting against it. And when those two things are in conflict, people usually believe the part of you that look more honest, and that's your body language. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. Hey, it is Tuesday. Yes. And if you're listening to me, God blessed you. He woke you up today. And again, you might have some things on your shoulders right now. You might be feeling some kind of way. You might have sickness in your body. But take this moment to give God thanks for waking you up. And then just pray to God. Ask God, hey, to heal me, heal my body. Hey, take this pressure off of me. And then operate in your faith. Your mustard seed of faith. Operate like it's already done. All right? You're aligning. It's all about aligning. Faith is alignment to what you believe God is going to do. And that's what I want to talk about now. Alignment. Mouth versus presence. Yes. This is where your brand gets exposed. You say one thing, but show another. You say you're confident, but move unsure. You say you're ready, but show hesitation. That gap, that's where trust is lost. People believe what they see first. Then they decide if your words match. If they don't, your message loses credibility. Alignment builds authority. And once credibility starts slipping, it gets expensive. Because people may still hear you, but they stop fully trusting you. They may still listen, but they no longer move with the same confidence. They may still nod, but internally they are questioning the stability of what you are saying. That's what happens when your mouth and the presence are disconnected. This is bigger than public speaking. This shows up in meetings. It shows up in business deals. It shows up in leadership. It shows up in parenting. It shows up in marriage. It shows up in every room where your words are supposed to carry weight. So the real question becomes, does your delivery match your declaration? Because when your communication is aligned, you don't have to fight so hard to convince people. The message lands with greater force because it arrived through a vessel that looked like it and believed it. Hey, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
If you just tuned in, you're listening to the Afternoon Praise. And if you miss any part of this show, you can go to waveradio.com and you can get the replay of the show minus the music. So we want you to hear everything. We want you to get all that. So we want to get this in your soul, you know. We want this to resonate with you. But let's talk about communication leaks. When your message isn't structured, it leaks. It changes. It weakens. It breaks down. Now, people are operating off of different versions of you, different understandings, different expectations, and now you're frustrated. But the real issue is you didn't control what they received. Leaks happen when there's no structure to hold the message together. And the dangerous part about leaks is that they often look small at first. A misphrase here, a vague instruction there, a tone that created the wrong impression here, an assumption that was never corrected. But once those things start multiplying, now confusion is everywhere. One person think you meant this, another person think you meant that. Now your message is fragmented across the room. And when communication leaks, momentum leaks with it. Execution slows down. Trust gets strained. Correction becomes harder because now you're not just managing the original message, you're cleaning up all the distorted versions of it too. This is why structure is protection. Structure holds the meaning together. Structure gives your words walls. Structure makes sure your message can survive moments, repetition, distance, and pressure. Because if your communication falls apart the moment it leaves your mouth, then it was never built strong enough to carry the assignment. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. Man, you have to be intentional. I always tell people when I'm in service, if I pray over the offering, I tell people be intentional about your seed. You know, Put your seed down, let it target something. Be intentional. Ask God, say, hey, this is my seed going towards this. We got to be intentional in our communication, even in prayer. We can be intentional with God, even in prayer, communication with God. But let's talk about intentional communication. High-level communicators don't speak casually. They speak intentionally. They think before they release. They structure before they deliver. Every word shapes perception. Every sentence builds or breaks trust. This isn't pressure. This is precision. And precision builds consistency. Intentional communication means you stop treating words like they are cheap. Words are not cheap. You recognize that your language carries weight. The right word at the right time can bring clarity, direction, peace, and movement. The wrong word at the wrong time can create confusion, offense, delay, and disorder. That's why disciplined communicators don't just speak because they have something to say. They speak because they know what needs to happen after they say it. They understand the outcome. They understand the timing. They understand the tone. They understand the communication is not just expression, it's strategy. And once you operate from that mindset, your conversations start changing. You become less reactive, less careless, less impulsive. You become more deliberate. And that deliberateness begins to build repetition around your voice. Now, when you speak, people expect clarity. They expect substance. They expect direction. This is what intentional communication does. It trains people to value your voice because your words have proven they are built with purpose. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown. Let's talk about the communication. Well, the cost of miscommunication. Miscommunication costs. It costs you opportunities, relationships, momentum, money. Things get delayed. Things get done wrong. Things don't get done at all. And most of it could have been avoided with better structure. Miscommunication also creates tensions, frustrations, distance, disconnection, all because something wasn't clear. And what makes this so serious is that many people don't realize how much they've been losing because they never labeled the problem correctly. They call it bad teamwork. They call it poor execution. They call it people not listening. They call it lack of support. But sometimes the root issue is that the communication was weak from the beginning. The expectation wasn't clear. The instruction wasn't plain. The tone didn't match the message. The vision wasn't translated in a way people could carry. And now you're paying for confusion that could have been prevented. Miscommunication drains energy because now everybody has to spend time recovering from what should have been clear the first time. It creates unnecessary meetings. I hate meetings. A lot of meetings. Meeting just to be meeting. Unnecessary tensions. Unnecessary emotional wear. That's why effective communication is not a soft skill. It is a performance skill. It is a leadership skill. It is a stewardship skill. Because when communication is strong, things move cleaner, faster, and with less damage. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. My time is almost up, but guess what? We have some more time. We got a little bit of time left. Let's talk about the real shift. Here's the shift. Stop focusing on what you want to say. Start focusing on what needs to land. That's leadership. That's control. That's impact. When you make that shift, your communication sharpens, your influence increases, your results improve. And that's where maturity shows up. Because immature communication is self-centered. It is driven by release. I said what I had to say. I got it off my chest. I told them how I felt. I'ma be who I'ma be. They just gotta deal with me. But mature communication is outcome centered. It asks, what needs to happen after this conversation? What needs to be understood? What needs to be carried forward? What does this person need in order to move correctly? That shift changes everything. Now you're not just trying to speak. You're trying to produce movement. You're trying to create alignment. You're trying to make sure the message doesn't just leave you, it reaches the other person and is usable form. That's the real shift from emotion to strategy, from noise to precision, from expression to influence. And once you live there, you stop wasting words on conversations that sound strong but accomplish nothing. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. I'm your host, Demetrius L. Brown.
Catch the wave. You're listening to Wave Radio, your home for uplifting gospel music.
You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. Man, this day went by quick. This is Triumph Tuesday, and you're listening to Wave Radio. My time is up, but I want to leave you with this. Triumph in communication is not about being heard. It's about being understood the way you intended. Because if people receive a different version of you than the one you sent, you're not building a brand, you're creating confusion. So from this point forward, slow down, be intentional, structure your message. Because how you say it determines what lands. And what lands determine how people move with you. This is Triumph Tuesday. Let's execute, people. And as we close, I want this to sit deep with you. Your voice is not just sound. Your communication is not just a habit. Your articulation is not just style. It's an infrastructure. It is the system through which your leadership travels. It is the bridge between what's in you and what reaches the people connected to you. So if the bridge is weak, the load can't travel. If the structure is unstable, the message can't survive. If the articulation is careless, the vision gets diluted before it ever reaches its destination. That's why this matters. Because some of you are carrying too much to keep speaking casually. There is too much purpose on your life, too much vision in your spirit, too much responsibility on your shoulders, too many people connected to your ability to communicate clearly. So build your words with strength. Build your tone with intentions. Build your presence with alignment, and build your communication in a way that your message can travel without losing its power. This is how you triumph. This is how you lead. This is how you make sure that what God put in you reaches the world with clarity, force, and integrity. You're listening to the Afternoon Praise. My time is up. I'm out of here. I will catch you tomorrow on Build a Brand Wednesday. Peace.
Stay tuned and stay blessed here on Wave Radio.